the associative laws. And so I want you to identify which one's the end statement and which one's the or statement. And I already wrote it up there so you can see which one's the end and which one's the or. So this is the end, right? Because you can see the ends. That's the end, that's the end. And then this is the or because you can see the or is clearly right here. Yeah, P, Q, and R. And so we got to write out P, Q, and R. And so if you remember our equation for the 2n, right? That means we're going to have 8 rows. And so that's good, right? And then we remember our other equation, which said 1/2 n. And so this is going to be 1/2, and this is going to be 1/4, and this new statement is going to be 1/8. And so, if you can see the 8, there you go. And then now we're going to go on, and half of these are going to be true. And then the other half is going to be false. We have Q. Now that 1/4 of these are going to be true. And so we got to take it kind of like how we did the other one. So it's going to be true, true. And you're going to eventually see the pattern, because this pattern is just going to be 1/4 true, 1/4 false, 1/4 true, and then 1/4 false. And this is going to be 1/8, so 1/8 true, 1/8 false, 1/8 true, 1/8 false, 1/8 true, 1/8 false. And so that's what's happening in your head. Your mind's computing it. And so how do we know if we did it right? The first row is going to be true, and the 8th row is going to be false. And so let's carry on. Now we got to write out our rest of our compound statements, right? And what does it mean to be a compound statement? Remember, if we watched the video, a compound statement means 2 statement variables put together, or 2 components put together. And so now we got to put our P and Q. So don't forget to put it into the parentheses. Finish our sentence over here, and our sentence is going to say P and Q in R. And so we want the parentheses because then that sentence won't make any sense. And then we're going to have the one over here, Q. So what are we looking at? We're looking at these two. And so let's denote the truth values. So the first one's true, this one's true because they're both true. And now they're all false because this is false right there, it's 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 false right there. And so we're going to have Q and R. And so what do we have to look at? We got to look at these two, Q and R. And so the first one's true. So the first one's true. The next one's false because this is false, right? And then right here, let's look at the next one. It says Q and R. Q is false. So I'm just going to look at all the rows here. This one's false. That one's true. This one's false. This one's false. This one's false. And so row 5 is true, if you can see it. And so you don't necessarily have to label your rows. I just label them for you guys so you can have an extra component to understand what's going on. And so right here we're going to have true, and the rest are going to be false, right? Because we said only row number 1, row number 5 are true for Q and R. And so right here that's false, and the last row is going to be false. And so now we carry on to our finishing our sentence. And so our sentence says P and Q and R. And so now what do we have to look at? So it's going to be R and P and Q. So there you go. So it's all has to be true. So the first one's true. Right, you see that? True, true. And then the rest are false, right? Because that's false, that's false, that's false, that's false, that's false, and so forth. And so right here it's all going to be false. Feel free to write it down, pause the video, and leave any comments or questions if you're confused. And so now we're going to go to this next finishing of the statement. So this is 2 statements put together to make another compound statement, and that's finishing our sentence. And so we're going to look at these 2. And so I'm going to use a different color. So I'm going to use this color. We're going to Q and R and P. So we're looking at these 2. And so the first part's true, so that's going to be true. And then this part's false, false, and so obviously it has to be false. compound statement, you say, oh, these are false. This is true, so I have to look at this. This is true, so I should look at this. They are. And so now right here, we're going to look at the truth, and we're looking at P. So we're looking at P, and we're looking at this. And so let's look down. This is true, 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 so we got to look at these. But then the rest down there are false. And so obviously these 5 following rows are going to be false. And so that's how you have to look at it. Thus, I'm not going to write it out to save you some time. So we say, thus this is logically equivalent. And we finish that with this statement here. And so let's go to our OR statement of this. Alright, now we're going to prove the OR statement over here. And if you don't know which one it is, I just highlighted it over here in the square box. And now our first thing we need to do is we have to write out all these statement variables, and I already done it, as you can see as following. And we got to go true, 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 false, 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 true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. And remember I said it has a pattern and order, and I want you to get some practice out and write it out yourself. And we need to look at the P and the OR and the Q. And so now I'm going to use this orange color, and so this is what we're looking at, right? I already put the little thing up here, P or Q. And so you could, if one or the other is true, then the whole entire thing is true. So this is true, 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 and these 2 are false. So it's going to be 6 true on top, and then the bottom 6 are going to be false. So true, 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 false, false. And now we're going to look at Q or R. And so what are we looking at? We're looking at these 2. The first one's true, the second one's true, the third one's true, and then the fourth one's false. And if you want to know what I'm talking about the rows, and these are the rows, right? So this is the 4th row, and you can see that these 2 are false. And so this one's true, this one's true, this one's true, and the bottom one's false. And so there you go. We have our compound statements. Now we got to put it into our sentence. And so what are we looking at now? Well, let's put it a different color and show you what I'm looking at. We're looking at this and the R. And so if you remember what I said about the last proof, we could just look down the column and see what's true. So we can see that the first 6 are true. So that saves us a lot of time, huh? We don't have to look back and forth on each one. You already know that the first 6 are true. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we got to look at these bottom 2. And right here, so you can see that that one's true. And the last one's false. And so now you can see a pattern. There's a pattern, right? If this is 7/8 of these is true, and the last one for the end statement, that was 1/8 of that problem that could have been true. I mean, logical equivalent statement that could have been true. So you can see kind of a pattern, like they're kind of the opposite in terms of their truth value. Not talking about their logical equivalency. These are logically equivalent to each other, right? These are logical equivalent to each other, but they have their own truth value. And this one had a 1/8 of a truth value. This had a 7/8 truth value. And you can see, what do you call it? What I'm talking about. This had a 1/8. So 1/8. This had a 7/8 truth value. And so let's finish our statement. Let's put this in another color. And you'll see what I mean right now. We have a P and a Q and an OR R. So let's look at one of these trees. So we can see that these first 3 are true. And now we look at their next one over here. It says our P actually, true, true, true. And we can see that the 4th one right here is true. And now we can see that the rest of these are false. And so we don't want to look at that tree no more. And you see that's false. And we can see that these 3 are true. So we go true, true, true. And then we look at this bottom part, and that's false. And so this is going to be false. And so all we need to do is finish our proof and say thus. And then you just bring down your whole entire logical equivalence statement slash sentences down, and you finish your